Hey, folks. Thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a minute. I'm Ryan Alcorn, co-founder and CEO here at GrantExec, joined today by Kristina Alcorn, our grant services director. Uh, Kristina is a career grant writing and proposal writing professional. She has recently, I'd say at this point, how long has it been, Kristina? Maybe a year since you began using GrantGPT. Maybe not quite that long, but about that.
I'd say 9 months, probably.
Yeah, and Christina has been excellent, secured, been contributed to over $1 billion in proposals won already, and had been doing great work with traditional grant writing. But with the introduction of Grant GPT, initially she was dubious, understandably, right? What can AI tools really do? There's a lot of flash, but has since become a convert and a major advocate for the solution. So today, the purpose of this call is to tell you a little bit more about how exactly GrantGPT works, how to get the most out of it, and how to ensure that your proposals are faster, more effective, and that you're able to use your time as wisely as possible because we recognize that the purpose of grants is not to simply write them, but to put your organization in the best position possible and free you up to get back to the work that really matters, executing on your mission. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina, and we'll be around to answer questions at the end. All right, thanks, folks. Christina, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's right. I spent 20 years before I joined GrantExec in proposal writing, and it was such a manual process. That's just the nature of the beast back in the old days. We would spend so much time reading through the funding documents, creating templates on our own, pulling in bits and pieces of reuse. It was just such a manual process. There was no shortcut at all. But as Ryan said, GrantGPT changes all of that. So before we really jump into the demo, I just want to highlight what makes GrantGPT truly different because we do get this question quite often. Why not just use any old GPT, any generic GPT? And there's a really good reason because unlike those generic AI tools, GrantGPT is purpose built for grants. It is truly an AI grant writing assistant. It blends advanced language technology and insights from our experienced grant professionals. It understands how funders think. It understands how applications are scored, and it understands how to write in a voice that resonates with the funder. And another question we get all the time is about privacy. And you can be assured that when it comes to your content, your organizational info, your data, your privacy is assured. Nothing you enter into GrantGPT is ever used to train the model. Your work is yours. It stays that way always. So let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen. I believe you can see that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use one of our earliest clients, Food for Neighbors, as our demo applicant. Food for Neighbors is a nonprofit dedicated to addressing food insecurity for middle school and high school students. And they are really an excellent example of a client who uses our full service grant writing um, services from one of our 28 grant writers, grant writing professionals when they need that extra lift, but they also use GrantGPT to support their in-house grant writing efforts. So this is their platform page. And if you're familiar with the platform, you know that probably the place where you spend the most amount of time is prospects. And so for Food for Neighbors, these are the opportunities that we scored against their profile as really the best options, the ones they have the best chance of winning. And so what Food for Neighbors does, and our other subscribers, if you find ones you're interested in, you save them, you click right here, and that puts them into this folder, a saved grants folder. This is a really nice way to take this large universe of opportunities and kind of narrowing them down even more so into ones that you want to investigate and potentially apply to. So let's say that Food for Neighbors is interested, and I know that they are, in applying to this Race to Rebuilding Trust and Community grant from Arlington County. Now, you'll see here under status that they're anticipating the next round. It's not currently open, but it will be open soon, we believe in September. And so it's not a bad idea, if you know you're interested in it, to go ahead and get started with the writing. So before they get to writing, they're going to look at this opportunity. They're going to read the description. They're going to look at the AI analysis that the platform prepares specifically for Food for Neighbors based on their profile. And so it gives this analysis. It's the strategic alignment, the resource commitment and competitiveness, risk factors, urgency, considerations. So this is everything that they should probably think about as they're having those internal discussions about whether or not they should pursue it. And they're probably going to want to go and visit the source. So that takes them to the funder page, in this case, Arlington County. And what you're going to want to do, especially if you're using GrantGPT to analyze the funding opportunity, is find their funding opportunity documents. In this case, it is their community grant guidelines. And so you'll want to download this as the funding opportunity document. This is really going to be the basis of everything. It's what GrantGPT is going to use to answer our questions. So you want to download that. I've already done so. And so say, okay, we want to use GrantGPT to apply. And so you simply click Write with AI, and that takes you to the GrantGPT page. Just one quick note, I don't know how familiar you all are with writing grants, but funding opportunity documents can have different names. They can be called a funding opportunity announcement, or a FOA, or a notice of funding opportunity, or a NOFO, many other things. But for simplicity, we're going to refer to this universe of documents as NOFOs. So we're here at GrantGPT, and I'm going to guide you through this today, but say you're on your own, a great place to start, right here, click here. And it's going to give you a lot of useful advice. Probably the most important thing right now is to bookmark this Mastering Grant Applications with GrantGPT, the reference guide. This is your user guide. So, go ahead and click on here. You can register for another training session if you wish. It'll be next month. But what's really important here is, go ahead and bookmark this so that you can always go back and refer to it. This also is going to have all the prompts that I'm going to use today. So as I'm going through showing you how I use GrantGPT, I'm going to refer to prompts. They're all in here. So you don't need to worry about taking screenshots or taking notes. Certainly can if you wish, but you can always go back to this user guide and get the prompts, the same ones that I'm going to use here. So, okay. And just a note about prompts. Prompts, if you don't know, those are the instructions that we give GrantGPT or any GPT to get it to perform the desired function, like the ones we're going to go through here in a minute. Prompts work best when they're clear, specific. They provide clear key details so that AI can tailor the response effectively. And if you're unsure of how to structure a prompt, you can even ask GrantGPT to help you. When I was creating the prompts that we're going to use, I put what seemed sensible to me, that seemed clear to me, and I wasn't always getting exactly what I wanted. And so I asked GrantGPT, how can I rephrase this prompt so that I can achieve XYZ? And that helped me to refine my prompts. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to upload that funding opportunity document that we downloaded from Arlington County. And I just happen to have it right here. So I'm uploading it. And the first thing I always do, whether I'm using an AI assistant or doing it the old-fashioned way, is assessing eligibility. If the organization isn't eligible, there's no use, there's just no reason to waste your time or resources in applying. So the prompt that I use is I say, using the uploaded NOFO, which we just uploaded, and the funder URL. So I grabbed that URL from Arlington County. Extract all explicitly stated eligibility requirements. I like to have it excuse me, I like to have it in a table format, and I want it to tell me, list the eligibility criteria, list potential red flags or areas of concern. I want it to tell me the NOFO section and page for reference because I want to be able to go back and make sure it's accurate. GrantGPT does a great job of being accurate, but I always want to be able to go back and say, where was that? So that I can go on page 50, Appendix 5, and see that's where it tells me it needs to be a nonprofit. Um, so I also tell it, do not include assumptions or hypothetical content. This is really important, and this is one of those things I learned in doing the refinement because I was getting a few weird things where it was it was hypothesizing about an answer. I think about this as if you ever had a situation where you're somewhere, this is kind of old, this is before, um, you could really use navigation tools, but you're somewhere and you ask for directions and people will just tell you something so that they can answer your question. Sometimes I feel like GPTs can be that way. So you have to tell them, don't be that way. And the way you do that is saying, don't hypothesize. You can even go so far as saying, don't hallucinate. So that's an important part that I like to include. So I presented this prompt, and here is what the response that I got. Here's the eligibility criteria. Here are any areas of concern or any potential red flags. Here's where the citation can be found. And here's recommendations for how to address any issues that might come up. So what I do is, let me move this out of the way. I go right here and I copy the table. And so I copy and paste this into my workspace. I use Google Drive. I set up a dedicated folder for the application, and I'm going to pop this right in there so that I can always go back and refer to it later. All right, so let's say that eligibility is understood. The next thing I want to do is I really want to understand funder goals. So I'm going to put in a prompt like, create a detailed explanation of the funder's goals, priorities, mission, and objectives as outlined in the uploaded NOFO. Adhere strictly to the uploaded NOFO and the funder URL, focusing on the specific areas the funder aims to support and prioritize. I always tell them to go back to include, to go back and look at the URL because sometimes there are things on the website that don't make it into the funding document, but that are still important to the funder. And so this is just double checking for me. It's giving me another source of information. I don't have to, in this particular session, I don't have to type in the URL again. It's going to remember it. You can if you want to, but it's not necessary. So here's where I get the responses for the funder, mission, and intent, the overall grant purpose, the core objectives, the funding priorities. These are the things that I'm going to want to keep in mind when I'm writing the application because the the grantor is looking to fund their mission, not your mission. If you can align your mission with theirs, you're more than halfway there. And so this is a way of doing that. This is a way of keeping those priorities in mind and speaking to those. Okay. Also very important, understanding the evaluation criteria. This is basically how you're going to be graded. And so you have to write to the evaluation criteria because there's a review panel. They're basically going to assign points and you want all the points. So I've asked it to identify and explain the evaluation criteria. from the uploaded NOFO and funder URL, provide specific guidance on how to meet the requirements. And again, I like it in a table format, and I'm going to avoid generalizations and assumptions. So here we go. So it's giving me the total weight is 100%, and then it's breaking it down. So section 1, 20%, section 2, 20%. Here's the criterion. Here's what the funder's looking for. And here's some suggestions on how to meet that requirement per the NOFO so that you can write to that. And then there's also an oral presentation, talks about that. Again, I'm going to copy this table, paste it into, for me, it's going to be in a Google Doc. You could put it into a Word doc, whatever works for you, and then keep that working folder with all my different elements. I do a lot of, we have 28 amazing grant writers. And what I do, a lot of my work is proposal management. So especially for these larger engagements that we have. So one of the things that I use GrantGPT for, I always use it, is as a proposal management tool. And so I'm going to use it to create a checklist of all the application components and the required attachments. I don't want to miss anything. The easiest way to get your application thrown out is to miss something in the review, the administrative review phase. So we want to make sure we don't leave anything out. We want to make sure that we that we don't exceed the word or character limits. That's pretty hard to do. It's actually impossible to do if it's a if you're just uploading content to their portal. But sometimes you're submitting individual documents for different sections, and you can go over and they're not going to read it, and they may throw it out altogether if it's too long. So I want a checklist that's going to tell me exactly how many characters, pages, words, whatever those limits are. So this is something that this checklist is going to provide for me. And in this particular one, we don't have limits, but other ones it will tell me that it does. So this is a checklist that I'm going to use as I'm writing. Check it off, it's done, it's properly formatted, etc., etc. And GrantGPT is always going to tell you at the end of a request, hey, here's something else helpful I could do for you. This is, hey, you want me to dump this into an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document? Great. I take GrantGPT up on a lot of these suggestions, and I've included a lot of them in my own prompts. So it's just endlessly useful. All right. One of the things I really love is the ability to create an application template. Now, this is useful first and foremost, I think, as creating a working document. You never want to work in the portal, develop it in there. Yes, most of them will say, save, but don't submit. But God forbid you're in the middle of working on it and you hit submit. So you always want to work on the document, on the application outside of the portal. And so this creates a template that you can use with your team. And so it's created a template that is true to the funding document requirements. And so it's laid it all out here for me. And then again, I can copy and paste and use this as my working document. And it's not only giving me each section, telling me the weight. If there were page limits or character limits, it would tell me right here. And it's giving me prompts for content that I can include. Now, this is very useful, but what's even more useful is creating a first draft. And you can do this by uploading reuse content. And so what do I mean by reuse content? Well, that's anything that you have created previously. It can be applications that you've previously submitted. It can be marketing slide decks. It can be um, articles that were written about your project or your organization. And so what I did for Food for Neighbors, because we write for them quite frequently, is I've created this Uber document of all their existing content in one place. Now you could upload individual documents, that's fine. I think you can do up to 8 at one time. So it could be, 3 applications you've previously submitted, and it could be, a slide deck, and it could be an article. It could be many things. Anything that talks about your organization as it's related to this project, initiative, or product that you want to get funded. So my prompt here is using the application template created in the previous prompt and the uploaded file. It would be files if I had multiple ones. Populate each section of the grant application. Insert applicable content from the uploaded document as appropriate. Make full use of the allowed character or word limits. Where content is missing or incomplete, provide sample content in italics. Okay, in this case, I am asking it to hypothesize because I want it to give me suggestions, but I'm asking it to put it in italics for easy identification. Ensure strict alignment with the NOFO structure, formatting requirement, and instructions. And so here it's creating, I'll call it a first draft, but something really useful to work with. And so some of my work is done. Here's the cover page, it's filled out. Here's an introduction. And here you can see this is the suggested content because we didn't have anything about leadership representation in the reuse that we had. And so it has created a pre-first draft, I'll call it. It's never gonna be ready to submit on the first go round, but it's a really good start. It's a great way to jumpstart the writing process. You're not just looking at a blank page or starting from scratch. One thing I'll tell you about this, and I do this all the time, is maybe you're here and you're like, I don't really like the response, or it's not quite robust enough, or it's bulletized and I want it to be in the narrative. So you can go back in an iterative process and I can say, expand on SMART goals in section 2. Expand on SMART goals in section 2. Use a narrative format rather than bullets. And I'm going to just tell it to revise just this section for brevity for our demo purposes. And so here we go. Before we had kind of brief bulletized response. Now we have a narrative response. So just to show you that you can always go back and you can tell it, expand on it, or you can say, create a response that is more, I don't know, that has a different flavor, whatever you're thinking. And you can just keep trying just different ways of responding and compare the different responses. Okay. Something else that I use it for is creating resumes. I don't know if any of you have had to write resumes, but in another life, I had to write them for, oh my gosh, just dozens and dozens and dozens of key personnel. And it can be kind of painful. And so what I love about using GrantGPT for this is, first of all, it creates the template for you. Sometimes the funding opportunity documents don't provide a template. They want you to provide resumes, but they don't give you a template. So by using a prompt like create a resume template that strictly follows the requirements outlined in the attached NOFO, ensure the template complies with all formatting guidelines if provided, note formatting requirements or page or character limits. So this Arlington County Race to Rebuilding Trust didn't provide guidance for the standalone resume. So this created one based on the requirements, and now I know it's going to be relevant and responsive. So here it's created the template. And then what I can do, just like I did for the application itself, I can upload existing resumes I have for staff. Let's see. I have one right here. Well, please ignore my cat. And I can ask it to use the information I have for this existing resume and reformat it so it is responsive to the Arlington County Race to Rebuilding Trust and Community Grant requirements. And so here it is. It took that existing resume I had for Nancy Johnson that had nothing to do with the race grant, and it converted it into something that's going to be responsive. And then it's also going to give me, identify any gaps. It's going to give me hypothetical examples for making a better resume. And that's just one example of the templates you can create. There was an application we worked on for a large utility company, and they needed all kinds of letters of commitment, letters of support, but the funding documents didn't say how it should be. They didn't give a template for it. They said it should include these things. So I could put those details in there, and it created the templates for the letters of support. That was a task that could have taken many hours, and it turned it into minutes. Finally, the last thing I want to show you, and this, I mean, I'm a broken record. It's all very useful. But I like to use GrantGPT as a reviewer. And so I will put in a prompt like review the uploaded application draft. Oh, I didn't give it a draft. Hold on. I'm going to give it an earlier draft that I put together for the race opportunity. It's probably going to say, I can do that if you, okay, I'm going to reload this one. Hold on. Okay, so here is the prompt. Okay, so the prompt is review the uploaded application draft, and this time I uploaded it, simulating the perspective of the funder review panel. Evaluate each section using the evaluation criteria listed in the NOFO and the funder URL. Ensure the review is actionable, specific, and tied directly to the funder's stated priorities. And then I break down how I want it to be, how I want to have the response provided. And so what I do is after I have a really strong first draft, I go through this exercise. I take whatever recommendations and I do another revision. And then somewhere in the middle of my process, I'm going to do this again. And then certainly I'm going to do it prior to submittal. That would be my last check to make sure. And so I uploaded a very early draft of the application. And so here's what it told me. Here's my strengths. Here's issues and gaps. Here's suggested revisions for each section. And then it's also going to tell me if I've attached the proper, if it requires attachments. But this is a really great way to make sure that you're not missing anything, that you've covered all the bases. And that gives me a lot of peace of mind when I'm about, before I submit. So I have thrown a lot at you, but I think you can see I am enthusiastic about this, and I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kristina. That was excellent. And for folks that have colleagues who are not able to make it today, we will plan to share out a recording of this session for all. Please do feel free to share questions in the chat. We are also available via our contact, so you can reach us either directly in the platform through the button, the blue button on the bottom right hand of the screen, or via email. You can contact either of us through our first names at grantexec.com. It's Ryan at GrantExec and Kristina at GrantExec, Kristina with a K. Kristina, one question that comes up often is can you use this across different types of funders? So, see the applicability here for a local government grant. What about a larger federal application or a state application that requires more technical support?
You can use it for everything, and I have. I've used it for small private funders. I've used it for large $100 million DOE grant. It's just think of it as an assistant. So anything you could ask an assistant to do, and actually quite a bit more, it can do. Yeah, so it's purposeful across the spectrum.
I think that is something that's interesting to think about when folks are using this tool or testing it out for the first time. What is the right way to think about this? We know that it's a tool, meaning that the user ultimately has to guide it, and this isn't a snap your fingers and the application magically appears solution. It's close, but how should folks that are testing the waters in grant writing think about GrantGPT? I like that assistant idea. Could you dive
Mhm.
into that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I mean, I think really for anybody, especially first starting out, use the user guide. We spent time thinking about it, thinking about how it would be most useful for the grant writing newbie and seasoned professional for both. I think for somebody new to grant writing, there's just so much you don't know. And so you might not know what to ask, but read through the user guide, look at the prompts, and let that be your guide. And I think also for the seasoned grant writing veteran, you're so used to doing all these things yourself that, and I was that person. You're like, wow, how can I, is this really, I'll do it. I can do it better. Then as long as you use a good prompt and you see the results, you cannot believe, I gave the example of the resumes. I can't tell you how long it takes to write resumes. And when I thought, hey, I wonder if GrantGPT can do it. Yeah, of course it can. And it created them like that. You just keep finding more and more uses. So really, if you can think it, if you were like, I wish I had some help to do X, ask GrantGPT to do it for you and see what happens. And I think I've had so many people come back to me, some in tears, some who have worked so hard for so long on a lot of these administrative tasks, and to find that they can be done instantaneously instead of in hours. I mean, honestly, just reviewing the funding opportunity documents. We used to call it shredding it, and sometimes it would be, 100, 200 pages long, and you're reading through the whole thing and you're highlighting and you're sticky noting it, tabbing it, just to find everything, just to keep track of it. That takes a lot of time. If I can go through that first example that I gave of understanding the eligibility criteria for one, and I can have it list it out for me and show me exactly where it is, then if I really want to, I can go back to that document, highlight, note the page number so that I can always go back and refer to it. And I have done that when I have meetings with clients and they're like, well, wait a minute, are you sure that XYZ is not applicable? I can go to that and I can go to, yep, on page 50, paragraph 3. And even it might have been hidden somewhere deep in the funding opportunity document that maybe I could have missed as a human, but the AI found it. So let it take on a lot of that administrative burden. You're the writer, you know the project, perhaps you know the funder. You're going to know best how to add that nuance, but let it do those things. If you find something tedious, that is probably something that you're going to be really glad to hand off to GrantGPT. And lastly, I'll say that the ability of having it act as a reviewer and reviewing your own work is hugely helpful. Um, my experienced grant writers here will know how you get page blind to something that you've been working on closely for days, weeks, months, that you can't even see anymore. You can't even see deficiencies. And here it is. It's got GrantGPT has no bias. They don't have skin in the game. They're just going to tell you, you missed this part. Here's how to fix it. Not just that you missed it, here's how you can fix it based on the funding opportunity document, um, uh, goals and priorities of the funder that maybe you've forgotten. Maybe you've just gotten a little bit tired and, like I said, page blind, and it's going to do that review for you. That alone is so useful.
Mm. Thank you, Kristina. With that, we'll wrap things up for this edition of GrantGPT training. We'll be back next month. If folks have any questions in the meantime, you know how to reach us, and we appreciate the opportunity to share this resource with you. All right, folks, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.